So you see how there's different ways to be perceiving this image. You can have somebody describing the therapist as very wise and embodied, and the client as a lost soul. But, I want to point out something. I also I want to come back to, several of you said I often say that to clients, okay? And it may not be the best thing to say, but I want to say there's nothing wrong with asking directly. And I certainly ask that question myself. So what I want to be absolutely sure that I'm not, you're not taking from this discussion and what I'm going to say later to say, oh my God, it's a terrible thing to ever ask the client, what does it feel in your body? Okay. But I want to point out that maybe one reading of this cartoon is to say, here you have an embodied therapist and a disembodied client. Okay. And wow. Yes, it might be true for the first 30 seconds. But if after a couple of minutes, it's still in that situation, what the cartoon is represented is wishful thinking on the part of the therapist imagining themselves that they're embodied. So if you're a therapist and you ask your client, where do you feel that in your body? And the client is unable to access it, and you stay with that kind of smug feeling that I have access to my body and they don't, the client doesn't, you're not doing your job. Because what your job is to make a bridge to what the client, where the client is. So if you're staying there, not, with the client not being able to come into their body, and you insist, probably the better representation of what's happening is you would have nobody in the therapist and just the therapist head on the ground the same way as the client, and two disembodied entities, dealing with each other. And that's where sometimes happens when there is an insistence on, well, you have to be connected with your feelings, or where is it? And we stay with that. Okay. And, so how does the therapist then notice it, say, okay, so here I am. That client is kind of stubborn. They're resisting, or they're this, or they're that, or they're disembodied, or whatever. What's happening to me when I'm noticing that? Okay. Getting into the body of the client. Well, probably what that therapist would notice is at that moment, they're really connected to their shoulds, to their thoughts of how things should be, and not connected to their body. If a client kind of goes, if the therapist goes and, well, I'm feeling some tension here. Why is it? What's happening here? I'm kind of feeling based on past experience, based on, right now I don't have access to my gut feelings. So essentially, I'm forced to resort to what I have, which is my intellectual training. So I'm not anti-intellectual. I love smarts. I love thinking. And the therapist might say, right now, I'm not feeling anything. But what I know from my past training is when I'm not feeling something, it means I'm in fear. And I know from my past training, from the process groups I've done, that my fear comes from the fear of disconnection. And I'm experiencing this situation as my client not playing with me instead of being connected with me. Okay. So, that helps me as a therapist come back a little bit to being a little more grounded, because then I'm connecting to past experience, And so you notice that's why the process group that I'm offering is experiential. So you have a chance to experience yourself in situations that are difficult, and see other therapists experience themselves in situations that are difficult, so that in moments that are difficult, and when your gut feelings are not able to be connected to the situation, you're able to draw on the conceptual knowledge, and that conceptual knowledge is going to help you be actually more embodied. Okay? So that's something that is the exact opposite of the idea. You first have to be embodied. The idea is, how do you come back to mindful engagement? And in some cases, it's your other experiences, conceptual experiences, that are going to give you the level of safety and grounding that's going to bring you back to being more embodied. Okay? And so from that place, you're more able to understand there is a need for a bridge, and you're going to help the client with the bridge. And you might say, hey, we've all been there, not feeling anything. For a second, myself, I didn't. Okay, and that's okay. And we take things where they are, okay? And the connection is there. And it's the connection that's going to help the client come back to being grounded in process. Now, does it mean that we would never want to put the client in a difficult moment? So there could be some value in consciously deciding that you want to keep the client in a moment of the difficulty of feeling anything. But then if you're not in a disembodied place and you have that, embodied empathy, you would say, look, I know it's difficult for you to be in that place right now. I know it, and we all go there sometimes. And I'm consciously bringing you there so you can experience for yourself for a few moments what it's like to not have access to your body. Okay? And it's okay. You realize you can survive it. We'll come back to it. So in that place, you're supporting the client being where they are.